Hi there, my name's Gwen for those of you that don't know me, and I'd just like to share with you a couple of books I've been reading. The first book is called No Future Without Forgiveness, and it's by Desmond Tutu, and it's his memoir on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa. I'd like to read you just one passage from this book because I think it's relevant to the days in which we live. He's speaking about Nelson Mandela and his time in prison. It would be easy to say that those 27 years were utter shameful waste. Just think of all he could have contributed to the good of South Africa and the world. I don't think so. Those 27 years and all the suffering they entailed were the fires of the furnace that tempered his steel, that removed the dross. Perhaps without that suffering, he would have been less able to be as compassionate and as magnanimous as he turned out to be. And that suffering on behalf of others gave him an authority and credibility that can be provided by nothing else in quite the same way. I kind of wonder that maybe in these times, our own steel is being tempered and removing our own dross. The second book that I'm actually only halfway through is the Autobiography of Martin Luther King. It's a bit of a theme, isn't there? But two men of God who made choices for which they could not have foreseen the consequences or what it would cost them, and yet they were obedient to God. Martin Luther King finished his studies. He was a very well-educated man, and he had a number of choices. He was planning to be a Baptist minister, and he could either choose the North, where there was less segregation laws, or the South, where the rules were imposed much more harshly. And he felt that God called him to choose the South. He was a man who wanted to fight injustice. He wanted to fight for justice, and he felt this was the right place that God was calling him to. But he didn't know what it would look like. He didn't know how it would be. And he ended up in Montgomery. And he didn't know that on the 1st of December 1955, Rosa Parks would refuse to give up her bus seat to a white man. And as a result of that, she was arrested, and Martin Luther, of course, played a massive part in that, and a movement evolved that he won many victories over, though they were hard fought. And reading in the book, it's just amazing the obstacles the authorities put in the way, but God was with him all the time. He didn't always find it easy, and during that time, during the bus boycott, he didn't like the word boycott, but I'm not sure what other word to use in its place. He felt he had nothing left. They're his words. He said that he'd come to the point where he couldn't face it alone. And this is what he says: "It seemed as though I could hear the quiet assurance of an inner voice saying, 'Martin Luther, stand up for righteousness, stand up for justice, stand up for truth. And lo, I will be with you even until the end of the world.' I tell you, I've seen the lightning flash, I've heard the thunder roar, I felt sin breakers dashing, trying to conquer my soul. But I heard the voice of Jesus saying still to fight on. He promised never to leave me alone. At that moment, I experienced the presence of the divine as I have never experienced him before. Almost at once, my fears began to go. My uncertainty disappeared. I was ready to face anything." And in that part of the book, which is quite near the beginning, he became less fearful or not fearful at all, and so did all his supporters. In fact, there's one episode he refers to in the book where the Ku Klux Klan visited, a threatening visit, and what used to happen is everybody would hide, turn off their lights, lock all their doors, play dead because they feared death. And on this occasion, they just left their doors open, they stood in their porches, in their gardens, they waved and just let them march on by. And the KKK didn't know what to do with this, so they just nipped down a side street and disappeared. And it wasn't always an easy life. After that prayer, that I've just read out. His house was bombed, the churches in the locality were bombed. And I haven't read this chunk of the book, but I have read the last little bit. I don't usually do that, but I do know how this story ends. And I'd just like to share this last little bit at the end of the book with you. On the 3rd of April 1968, Martin Luther made this final speech. And on the 4th of April 1968, he was assassinated. And this is what he says. He's talking about death. And he says this: I think about my own death, and I think about my own funeral. And I don't think of it in a morbid sense. Every now and then I ask myself, what is it that I would once said? And I leave the word with you this morning. I'd like somebody to mention that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to give his life serving others. I'd like for somebody to say that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to love somebody. I want you to say that day that I tried to be right on the war question. I want you to be able to say that day that I did try to feed the hungry. And I want you to be able to say that day that I did try in my life to clothe those who were naked. I want you to say on that day that I did try in my life to visit those who were in prison. I want you to say that I tried to love and to serve humanity. Yes, if you want to say that I was a drum major, say that I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace. I was a drum major for righteousness. And all the other shallow things will not matter. I won't have any money to leave behind, and I won't have fine and luxurious things of life to leave behind. But I just want to leave a committed life behind, and that's all I wanted to say. If I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word or song, if I can show somebody he's travelling wrong, then my living will not be in vain. If I can do my duty as a Christian ought, if I can bring salvation to a world once wrought, if I can spread the message as the Master taught, then my living will not be in vain. Wow. I know we could say that Martin Luther King was an exceptional man, and of course he was. And we might say that he was an exceptional man living in exceptional times. But we too live in exceptional times. And could we not seek to aspire to God's exceptional best for us in these days? Thank you.